Hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture on just-in-time access. Attackers are continuously scanning the public internet looking for open management ports used by Remote Desktop for Windows Virtual Machines or SSH for Linux. Brute force attacks will use scripts to try common combinations of username and password to attempt to gain access. If successful, an attacker can take control of the virtual machine and then go on to compromise the rest of the cloud environment. One way to reduce exposure to a brute force attack is to limit the amount of time that a port is open. Management ports don't need to be open at all times. They only need to be open while an administrator is connected to the virtual machine, for example, to perform management or maintenance tasks. With just-in-time access, Security Center uses Network Security Group and Azure firewall rules to only allow access for a limited time and only on the specific ports with the source IP address or network range of the authorized administrator. Once just-in-time is enabled, the steps to use it are as follows. The user makes the access request, provided he or she has an RBAC role allowing them to do so. Azure Security Center then decides, based on policy, whether to grant access. Next, Security Center configures network security groups to allow inbound traffic from the specified network location on the relevant port. The user connects and undertakes the necessary administration work. And finally, at the end of the allotted time period, Security Center removes the extra NSG rules and reverts them back to the original state. There are several different ways an administrator can configure or request just-in-time access. The Azure Security Center section in the Azure portal, the part of the Azure portal relating to the specific virtual machine, Azure PowerShell, or programmatically using the REST API. So, for example, here's a screenshot showing where to request access in the Security Center section of the Azure portal. Appropriate RBAC permissions are required, and just-in-time access can be audited using the Azure Activity Log. It's worth considering how just-in-time access would fit into real-life security architectures. Here's an example security architecture in Azure, designed to make it as hard as possible for an attacker to compromise the infrastructure. All virtual machines are inside a private Azure virtual network with no public IP addresses. There's a default route back to the on-premise network. And in this example, there's no external internet access to resources in Azure. But if we did need to allow this in a secure way, it would be implemented via an application gateway or firewall. Administrators connect from the on-premise network via ExpressRoute, with a bastion or jump server for administrative access. Remote access is provided by an on-premise VPN with strong authentication. So the question is, would just-in-time access be beneficial in this scenario? Well, it's hard for me to see how, as the virtual machines have no public IP addresses and no default route directly to the internet. You could even argue that if public IP addresses and a default route to the internet were allowed to accommodate just-in-time access, that would actually weaken the overall security posture by removing defense in depth. So, I'd like to ask you a question. Is just-in-time access good security architecture? What's your answer? Yes or no? It may be that you said yes, because using just-in-time access is better than a virtual machine with a public IP address and unrestricted access from anywhere on the internet. Or your answer may be no, because you may think that just-in-time isn't compatible with good security architecture, and because just-in-time could potentially be used by an attacker to gain access. But I don't want to tell you the answer. What do you think? Let me and your fellow students know by posting your opinion on the discussion forum for this lecture. Now you can move on to the Just-in-Time Access Lab. Ensure that you've already completed the Security Center Lab. Remove the Priority 4000 rule from your network security group. Turn on your Linux virtual machine and assign a public IP address to it. Check that you can't SSH to the server directly from your laptop. In the Azure portal, Virtual Machines, select the Linux virtual machine. Press the Connect button and then choose the option to enable just-in-time access. Edit the just-in-time policy to TCP port 22 with a defined CIDR block comprising your public IP address and a maximum duration of 1 hour. Then request just-in-time access to the Linux virtual machine. Test that you can remotely connect and log in to the Linux server from your laptop. Inspect the temporary NSG rules created by Security Center and see which of these are removed after 1 hour. And finally, tidy up. Dissociate and destroy the Linux server public IP address. Also, turn off your virtual machines when you're finished to minimize cost. If you want to take the challenge approach to this lab, please pause the video now, go ahead and complete these steps, and when you're finished, you can compare how you did it with my walkthrough. If you prefer the guided approach, then I'll see you in the Azure portal now. You've logged into the Azure portal. Go to Network Security Groups. Select your network security group. You'll see a rule with priority 4000 with the name Deny All In. This will prevent the just-in-time access from operating correctly, so select the options and delete. Confirm. The network security group is being updated. The rule has been deleted. Press refresh to confirm. Next, go to Virtual Machines and turn on your Linux virtual machine. Select the Linux virtual machine, Networking, Network Interface, IP Configurations, select the primary interface, and enable a public IP address. Configure required settings, create new, standard, rename it to something convenient such as Linux, and press OK. Save. Return to networking and virtual machines. Back to the Linux virtual machine. Copy the public IP address that you've just created to the clipboard. Then move to Terminal for Mac or PowerShell for Windows. SSH. Paste in the public IP address and press Enter. A built-in SSH client is included with recent versions of Windows 10. If you're using an older version of Windows, you'll need to install a standalone SSH client, such as PuTTY. The SSH connection is timing out, so Ctrl-C to cancel. Go back to the Azure portal. On the Linux server virtual machine, press Connect. You'll see a warning to improve security, enable just-in-time access on this VM. Click on the link and enable just-in-time access. Select Open Azure Security Center to investigate the policy. Your Linux virtual machine will appear in the configured list of just-in-time VM access. Select the options and edit. If for any reason you don't see the 3 dots, This may be associated with your particular subscription type or settings. In that case, just skip the next section and use just-in-time access with the default policy of 3 hours. Assuming that you have been able to edit the just-in-time virtual machine access configuration, select, change the protocol to TCP, change the allowed source IP addresses, open a new browser tab, find out your IP address, copy to the clipboard, paste your IP address into the field, change the maximum request time to 1 hour, and press OK. Then save. Your just-in-time access policy has been updated. Return to virtual machines, your Linux server, and on the overview screen, press connect. Copy the command to the clipboard. That will include the name of your local admin account on the Linux virtual machine. In your case, it may be different from the one which I chose. Leave the source IP at all configured IPs and request access. The just-in-time access request has been approved. Go to Networking. You will see new Network Security Group rules created by Security Center, including a rule which allows SSH access from your source IP address. Switch back to your terminal for Mac or PowerShell for Windows. Paste in the command, press Enter, and you should now successfully connect. Select Yes, enter your password. You've now successfully logged in using just-in-time access from Azure Security Center. Return to the portal. Security Center has inserted 2 new just-in-time access network security group rules to your network security group. A rule with priority 100 allowing inbound access on TCP port 22 from your public IP address to the Linux virtual machine. And a second rule with priority 4096, denying access from anywhere to that Linux virtual machine on TCP port 22. The rule with priority 100 takes precedence over the rule with priority 4096, so access is allowed from your public IP address, but from nowhere else. Let's see what happens after an hour. Okay, so the hour is up, and you'll see that Security Center has removed the rule with priority 100 permitting access on TCP port 22 from your public IP address. However, it has left the rule with priority 4096 in place. That's the rule denying access from anywhere to the Linux virtual machine on TCP port 22. If you're planning to use just-in-time access, you'll need to take into account that Security Center will insert rules such as this and leave them there, because this might inadvertently remove intended access, particularly from other virtual machines within your VNet. Well, there's one more thing that you need to do, and that's tidy up. Go to Virtual Machines, select your Linux virtual machine, choose Networking, select the network interface, choose the public IP address, and dissociate. Confirm. I'll fast forward the video. The changes have been made to the network interface. Go to public IP addresses, Choose your Linux public IP address and delete. Confirm. Your Linux public IP address has been deleted. Go to Virtual Machines, select your Linux server, and stop. Well, that concludes the Just-in-Time Access Lab. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, feel free to move on to the next lecture.